Welcome to Shamanic Voices, a profound journey into the heart of shamanism, led by a seasoned practitioner with over 40 years of experience and his journeyman. Join us as we learn how this ancient wisdom can help you navigate your modern life. I'm Brian Nolan, your host, a journeyman Tietia, and with me now is your co-host, Georg Breckman, a shaman at Tietia. Georg, how are you doing today?
Well, very good, Brian. Looking forward to what you're bringing to the table today. You've had some interesting cases, as you always do.
It gets pretty exciting up here, working between multiple different jobs and different avenues all the time. We were just discussing about the power of the past and really how much past events tie into the present, which of course makes sense logically to anyone that's been through anything. But when you start seeing the physical manifestations of these in the body, whether it be within contractures, whether it be migraines, or autoimmune, or any various types of things that have gone on, the from day one training with you and learning, I was always blown away by how impactful it was. But until actually working with it, I didn't really get to see it and understand how it wasn't just a single line going back. It's not this event caused this caused this. It's just the web of weird that we work in.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting you put it as far as the past influencing the present. A lot of it's just the emotional capture of the past, our emotional reaction to it, and then the embedding, the somaticization of unresolved emotional or mental conflicts in the body at present, which
right.
is what we see reflected when we're dealing with, say, autoimmunity or other symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I was reading Mark Puryear's, if I pronounced that correctly, his The Nature of Asatru, as I'm learning more and more about the culture that we work in. And the saying that he quoted was, the heart lives in the past, the mind lives in the present, and the eyes look to the future. And when I read that, it resonated so strongly. And I've said this to multiple people since then, and I see their body just go, this makes so much sense. But, the heart being the emotional part, not, ignoring good or bad, but leaving the emotional baggage, the things that are not necessarily needed, living back there. And not just from a negative sense, but, let's say that someone had a really positive interaction in the past with the past partner. And if they're trying to live now, but they're only focused on that was the last thing that made them happy, you better find some happiness in your present, because if that's what you're holding on to, that's not good. You're going to be stuck there. But I really enjoy that phrase.
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about here is just the ability to process whatever we lived through before, good or bad, not to hold on to it, process, let it go through us, but not get stuck. To look at yourself more like a tube than like a storehouse,
Yeah. I mean, I know for myself, kind of growing up, it was always programmed in the concept of original sin, where I had to always kind of feel guilt from day one for things. So it was very hard to process things. And being raised Irish Catholic, you're not allowed to process things either.
Sure.
But I noticed more and more as I learned to ground properly, how I'd have an issue with grounding, because it's like I wasn't allowed to. I had my roots in a different foundation than the current one. And then as I learned more about this path, this culture, and everything else, and things made a little more sense, I stopped feeling that guilt that kind of reinforced holding on to the emotions. Do you see that with clients a lot?
Yeah. I don't think they so much feel guilty about holding on to emotions. It's almost like a program that's on automatic. If they didn't resolve
the guilt kind of made me hold on to emotions. I wasn't even conscious of it.
Sure. Yeah, if they didn't resolve whatever the issue was, whether it's remorse or anger or whatever, 10 years ago, it's still there. And maybe it's muted by subsequent living, subsequent different experiences, but the core issue, whatever it is still stuck in there somewhere. It's like getting I think they used to have an old saying in the days of horsecraft and so on, of having a burr beneath your blanket. The idea that if a horse passed through certain types of, like beggar lice, certain types of weeds that gave off a little spiked plant seed to carry it from one place to the other on a mammal, or it got stuck under the burr, the horse was going to be very difficult to ride.
Right,
Because
right.
it's
That
stuck
makes
under the
sense.
blanket. Same concept, So the idea of having a stuck issue, a little irritating point. And of course, one of the things that I think our form of giving psychological release does is to explore it, help them frame it, put it into perspective, and hopefully process it on the spot and put it behind them.
And
where they're
confront
aware
it,
of
really.
it. You don't want to ask them to forget it, but just make peace with it and realize that you can't change that circumstance.
And of course to make peace with the circumstance, the conflict, or whatever it was that occurred, they have to understand fully what it was that occurred, not just through the lens they experienced as a child, or even as a young adult, or as an adult in many aspects as well. They need to understand the points that led to that way, to leave it in the background. Someone can't, if someone does something that's, let's just say, not the best, they can't just apologize for it if they don't even know what they're apologizing for. It's like forcing
for sure.
forcing a partner, say you're sorry, and you're like, I'm sorry, so you're not mad at me? That doesn't solve anything at all. The emotion is still there, unresolved. If anything, you kind of create cognitive dissonance more so in the person's brain.
Yeah, and resolution can indeed. I mean, apologizing can be part of the resolution if one feels that one's done something wrong, even if the person they did it to is no longer there, being able to bring up an image of them as you remember them, apologize for not having been more supportive, whatever the heck it is that you'd like to air.
Yeah.
And then just leaving it there, just understanding that some things don't get resolved. There is part of our vanity, part of our narcissism is assuming that we deserve to have everything neatly packaged and neatly resolved in our lifetimes. And part of spiritual maturity is realizing that life is messy and it's not always going to be resolvable. Everything's not going to go in a neat little folder where you put a heading on it and file it away. It's not going to always be that easy.
But that's not fair.
I know, isn't it? And as they say, it's not.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me also of the. So when you have an occurrence that, let's say for instance that you've done something bad in your past, like let's call it pretty bad. I was an addict for 15 years. I did some things that I definitely regret. I know some things that I was able to make right with people in the sense of just touching base, taking accountability, but I also had to learn, and I found it the hard way a couple of times, just because I wanted to take accountability doesn't mean that person wanted to hear it. And you have to have that balance where you understand this is, if it doesn't help this person, you taking accountability, trying to go apologize to them, it's almost like you need their acceptance of your apology to make you feel better. That's not an apology. That's not.
Well, I mean, it could be real. That's not to say that there's nothing wrong with if they let you off the hook or you then let yourself off the hook. The important thing is just trying to balance something. There's an imbalance created in the world. If you harm somebody needlessly or exploited somebody, whatever that, trick somebody, fill in the blanks. And to go back and address it is a way of pledging to yourself that you're not going to repeat that way of acting is behind you and does not define who you are. And even in the eyes of that person you bring your apology to, they jolly well will look at it and go, okay, that's not the same person as did this to me, fill in the blanks 8 years ago. This sounds like a completely different person. There's a remorse there. I wouldn't do that if I had that situation pop up again. So that's a good thing in a way. It's like in their mind, there's a little bit of resolution going, well, hey, life taught them otherwise in the years since. Good. Now I may not tell them I forgive, but I can forgive. I can put less emphasis on it, knowing that they've changed and that they've become a different individual, no longer exhibiting that trait, whatever it was. So yeah, there's an interaction that's important for both sides there. But like I say, you may not see it right in front of you because that person's trying to hold the indignity and the need for revenge, the need to get back, the need to balance it on their own. As they may or may not be mature enough spiritually to accept your apology fully.
Oh, of course. And what I mean is them not accepting the apology should not dampen the side for you or make it should demand their acceptance of it.
Oh, no.
And that's something a lot of people don't understand. And I think I've found a lot of people in the step programs where, although they do tell people that's not how it works, they almost expect it because they're still an addict brain. This person needs to forgive me because I said I'm sorry. It's like, do you even know what you're sorry for? No. But if they say they forgive me, then it's real. And if someone says I forgive you without actually meaning
that is one of the good things about the 12-step program is people realizing that having been an addict of whatever sort drove them to being parasitic or predatory toward their fellow man at some point. They were getting those resources somehow or the other to keep buying those drugs or whatever gambling, whatever it was. And that was harming someone else for sure. So,
well, that's one reason the sponsors will help someone else go through the steps, because sometimes they realize things going through it again, like, wait a minute, I didn't resolve this. It's a learning process.
Even at first, when their apology, even if it just appears to be mechanical, eventually they may internalize it and go, I really do see that it had an impact on so-and-so. They're not just a bit player. What is that term they usually say? NGC, NPC, non-player.
Oh, non-playable character.
Non-playable character. They're not just sitting over here as a stage prop for my life is the pageant.
Yeah.
Where it's all about my getting this substance or whatever the heck it is that's the object of my addiction. No, I harmed somebody else who's a real person on the way to getting this. And enough times saying, I'm sorry, you start to believe it. You start to internalize it. I've seen this happen with addicts I've worked with.
Yeah,
and absolutely. I didn't really emphasize that part of it, but I did say that it was important to make amends to all whom you've harmed.
Well, it's the reason when you write the letter, it doesn't necessarily mean you send it to the person, but you write it because sometimes you don't even realize everything tied together in it until you're going into that process, through associative memory, especially again, as an addict, especially with drugs, you literally do not remember a lot of the things. And that's actually a good point also when it comes to conflicts from the past. If you don't remember certain things, it's very hard to have a full picture of what your life is.
Is the addiction tends to dull the sensibilities of the addict toward having any sort of empathy for the victims associated with their addiction. You see, so part of my work in working with the amends part of it is to go to break this binary relationship. When I say binary, what I mean is this. There is myself, the addict, wanting this object of my addiction over here. And everything is just my interaction with that. If you happen to have a resource that helps me get from here to there, you're just a non-player character. You're just in the way, and I have to play you like a token to get from here to there. So it's entirely myself and the substance or the experience or whatever the hell it is I'm going after. And so you introduce conscience when you say, okay, how do you think Sam felt when you saw him and borrowed that money that you had no plan whatsoever to repay? Oh, he's got plenty. Oh, wait a minute. He's got 3 kids. So what if one of them needed shoes the next day or he needed a car repair so his wife could take them to school the next day? What effect did that loan that you borrowed from him with no intention of repaying have on that family's life? You have to think that way. Well, I wasn't thinking that time. I said, I know. So we're going to back up and think about that now. Okay.
Yeah. Because at the moment they rationalized why it was okay. A lot of time, what I think people don't understand, I know me and you do, but that when an addict is doing that, most of the time, they're not acting out of malice. They're not actively trying to hurt the NPCs. Why would you hurt an NPC? They're just there for your amusement. They can go if they need to. You're not even thinking about it. And the same thing taking away from drugs with codependency and sex addiction and everything else. It's a toxic relationship with either an inanimate object that you give a life to, and you're in a relationship with.
Yeah, it basically is. That's what I'm saying. There was a binary relationship with this that you had to have, whether it's that cigarette or, that line of cocaine or that gambling experience or that next body you have to have, because you have to constantly be on a conquest, or, it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it all ties together. That makes total sense. Now, one more thing to tie back to what we were talking about before, with the concept of sin being a reinforcer of guilt, underlying mechanisms of not really letting things go or being able to understand them. Because logically, I mean, to us, and it's not to attack anyone else's worldview, but coming into this world with sin never made sense to me as a kid. It just didn't click. I didn't know why that had to be a thing. So for me, it created that dissonance. But then the concept of the omnipotence, that everything happens for a reason, or they know it's going to happen, well, then that makes it a victim mentality, where these things happen, they knew it was going to happen. Do I feel guilt, or was it supposed to happen? And it just creates more conflict around it. So it just becomes this kind of
loop. It's almost like saying that the deity, the causal underlying force of reality, however a particular faith sees that, whether it's one or many, that they're in on it, that they're okay with it, whatever the imbalance in human society or the suffering that was created, however that happens.
Right.
I think from our perspective, it happens a bit differently. When we look at, you may have acted incorrectly. Well, what it means is you maybe didn't act according to your highest character, your most altruistic. You didn't act for your community. You gave way to, let's say, immediate gratification rather than deferred gratification. That's the kind of thing that we think about as pagans, rather than sin. Kind of sounds like some accountant working for the company, and they're watching human resources is spying on you while you're on the factory floor to catch you doing this or that wrong. Or time and motion studies, people are watching you to see if you move fast enough and produced enough. It's like,
so internal affairs, basically, right?
being an ant in an ant hive. And that's not how we look at it at all. It's more a matter of making good choices, life-affirming choices which don't harm others in the process of getting what we need or want, and always evaluating our wants, and, not thinking that we have to have the whole world and everything at our fingertips in order to be happy. So if we think that, we're going to become exploiters, we're going to use more resources than we really need to, just for show. I remember when John McCain, was the late senator, was running for president, somebody pointed out that he had 7 different homes, his personal homes. I'm not talking about rental property. I mean, 7 different homes, like somebody having 20 different cars, which means somebody else out there can't have one. I mean, that ultimately is what it amounts to. That's no joke. I'm not saying that society or a welfare mechanism has the responsibility to hand somebody something they didn't earn, but it does create an artificial scarcity when a few people hoard a lot of something.
Of course it does.
It's less than anybody else could have, and therefore the price goes up. It's more out of reach. That's just basic economics. So those are all things to think about. Do we think of sin? No, I think we think in terms of we're capable of making misdeeds, we're capable of making misjudgments, and we're always correcting ourselves. We're always learning with experience. And we look at the gods and goddesses as being allies to the higher part of our being, the better angels of our judgment, if you will.
Well, one thing I've learned through this process,
align ourselves to that.
Yeah. One thing I've learned through this process.
So the whole point of life is to be self-correcting.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Christian, Islamic, and Judaic perspectives are all, and the Semitic mythologies are all based on the idea that life is this big contest between good and evil, and you're always choosing good or evil. And every day is this conflict between the two. I think we look at it a bit differently. It's all a matter of, if we're here for a reason at all, it's to evolve, to become more capable, to become more wise, and to just automatically live in a way that maybe we even have fewer of those issues pop up where we would have to choose between good and evil per se. We still might want to choose always the higher rather than the lower path, looking at the effect it has on others or on the planet, on natural resources, on other species, whatever. But not this constant fixation with good and evil and judgment, and this hammer hanging over your head, or this Damocles sword over your head.
Well, what comes to mind as you're describing that is how we look at things when we look at the past. We look at it as events to be proud of. Things have been done well, things to learn from. And some things are just trivial. They happen. Nothing major. Not everything is a giant challenge. But the things that were impactful, you did it wrong. Whether it was purposeful or not purposeful, you learn. You tip the scales back into your favor, and things you did good where you feel pride for. Meanwhile, the other keeps you in the past to constantly overanalyze. Did I do this right? Am I being judged? Last week at work, this meeting, did everyone hate me because I did this little thing? It's too late. If you think it was weird you did it, don't do it again, or ask someone, was it weird that I did it? Oh, I can't do that.
Well, you want to avoid a fixation on the past.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the problem with the fixation, with the obsession with guilt and misdeeds, is that it actually leads you into more of it. It's like somebody who's constantly looking at the left lane, and this is a proven fact with driver behavior. They're going to automatically start steering the car that way when you're supposed to be driving in the right lane in our country, in a lot of the world. Maybe not in the British Commonwealth and not in all of it, but this is the concept. For whatever you're focusing on, you're going to tend to get more of. You're going to tend to attract more of it.
Yeah.
You're going to tend to automatically steer yourself into that. So if you're constantly looking at your misdeeds, it's almost like accepting it as part of your nature that doesn't need to be. On the other hand, if you look at it, and I think the healthy way a pagan should look at it as well, when I get up the next day, I have an opportunity, if there was a mistake the previous day, to do that same situation I came upon, to master that same event where I didn't respond as resourcefully as I would like to have responded. Not necessarily good and evil. Maybe I could just perform better. It gives me a chance to do it better.
Yeah.
The self-critical nature is a matter of, I think what the Japanese term for it is kaizen, which they use as a term to encourage excellence in business, excellence in manufacturing, especially in how you do business, like continual improvement. And I think that's what we try to look at. How do we continually improve ourselves? We're the finished product here. That's what we're working toward being.
And also to just like the hyperfixation on the past, tying us into it, the anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, because anxiety isn't just the future, but also the obsession with what's going to come. We can look forward and, plan accordingly, be aware of, but if we're obsessed with what's going to come and we're only living in that state, we're not here. Example, with everything going on in the world and the crazy things, if we're constantly obsessed with it and we're not actually living our life, improving ourselves, well, we miss out. We miss out on the whole purpose of being here.
Well, we also are kind of trained to look at it always from a profit and loss perspective. Like, what I did it have an immediate positive result? Did it net something? And really, a lot of what you do, you're not going to see an immediate result from. You're doing it just because it's spiritually correct to do it, because it's uplifting to do it without expecting an immediate reward, any immediate pat on the back, just because it's the right thing to do. That's all.
Yeah. Look at what we've been doing, building the podcast, everything else. There's no reward here right now in the sense of monetary gain, but it's the right thing to do, and to share this with the world, it's worth more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's already grown more and more followers and everything to work with and help. And it's if anything that you do, you reap all the rewards immediately. Make sure it wasn't a scam, because it
Yeah,
probably was, or you got incredibly lucky, and good for you. Good for you.
yeah, you're right.
But that's 1 in a million that happens.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
so true.
but no,
Well,
I think that should be really the big thing to remind people of always, the power of staying here in the present and enjoying where you are now. That really is the foundation and the point of living. And you were just going on about something to me as we are getting reconnected. What was it?
well, I guess one of the points you could say is to whatever you're doing, to face whatever you're doing, whatever challenges occur in your life with nobility and temperance and sobriety. And to, it's kind of, but I think Nordic and Stoic thought were very similar. And Stoics were not the average Greek. I think if you certainly follow some of Dr. Amon, Amon Hillman, Hillman's work about what was actually going on, his actual translations, the real sources, how words were actually used in the classical world and what they meant in context. It's a pretty strange society. It was a lot more like Hollywood than we might like to think, a lot of stuff going on that was, by modern ideas, quite reprehensible. But within that society, though, there were these Gnostics, there were the Stoics, people who had a vision of a higher way of living, and I think that's what we would like to ascend to, would like to emulate. So living nobly, living resourcefully, living well in whatever challenge you've had, that's all that we can really hope to accomplish.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody else is going to come down here and save us from whatever our human condition is. We can try to make it better through our rationality, our temperance, our reason, and indeed our contact with the shining ones, because they help us with inspiration. They sometimes protect us from difficult situations. But we basically are here to be the interface. We're here to do what we're here to do.
Yeah.
To live, to evolve, to face it, to overcome what we have to overcome.
Well, especially towards the end of life, as I'm working with elderly people, and towards the end of life, last couple of years, and when someone gets that point, they often question, one, what happens when you die? Of course, it's a question for everyone. And truly, we have our foundation, what we believe, but when you get there.
Yeah.
But also the question of, was my life worth something? Did I do everything I wanted to? Did I do everything I needed to? Did I do everything I can? And these are three different things entirely. But I was working with a client today who, very, very wonderful gal, and her shoulder was completely contracted in. And it's been like this for a very long time. She's worked in high-level tech companies for years. I didn't know too much about the past, but I could feel that there's something, in a sense, emotional going on with this, an inner conflict. And as we discussed it, it illuminated that the fear of what's going on in the country right now. Not for her. She's doesn't have that. She's got 4 years left, probably. She's like, I'm 96. I'm done.
Sure.
But her grandkids, brand new grandkids. And as we're talking about this stuff, it's illuminating the fear of the future for them. And then it goes into, did I do enough? Did I do enough to make an impact on this world? And this came out through the stories. And then as we started talking about what she did and what she did through her life, working with the students and working with other various teachers, and focusing on teaching different children different ways, and neurodivergence, and how not all kids learn the same way. She's telling me these stories about walking into a room back in, this is going to be the 50s, I think, 50s or 60s, walking into a room of Black students, Black teachers, lower sociodemographic. And they walk and she just hears them go, oh, another white lady. And she presented what she was going to them. And afterwards, it came up to her and said, please come back anytime. They appreciated and respected it. And I saw not just her reaction in her eyes as she's recalling this really impactful story, but her shoulder is releasing little by little, because she's getting reattuned with the involuntary contraction that's formed in her shoulder from forgetting that, no, I really did make an impact. I did as much as I could, because it's been the constant drive that I need to do more and more and more. But also, I'm tired.
Sure, sure.
So just seeing that power of it. And by the time we were done with the conversation, she started where her arm was like this, and she would kind of talk with this openly, and this arm was stuck like here. But at the end of it, she was talking with both her arms open. And the nerves are reawakening, the muscles are reawakening. And I just stopped her. I go, wow, you really like to talk with both your hands, don't you? She looks down, she goes, oh my God, my shoulder's moving. I go, yeah, crazy concept, right? But so this is a positive version of how powerful the past can be. Just reminding yourself towards that end point, or whatever point you want in your life.
Well, when you speak about a psychosomatic fixture like that, where you have contracture, you have lesions for adhesions forming in a particular joint because of lack of use and so on, compression and so on. What you're really looking at is, this is probably her active side of the body. She's perhaps used to writing a lot with it, typing, writing, dialing the phone, etc., and all the work that she's doing. So by making this passive, this is a way of withdrawing from the world. This is a way of somaticizing that conflict. I can't do anything more toward affecting the way things are or were, so I'll just freeze this up. So when you acquaint her with looking at it with a little more objectivity, the good that she brought into the world and the fact that she did the best she could when she was an educator, or I guess later in corporate work, you took the power out of the conflict. You depotentiated the conflict. And that's certainly part of what we do in our therapeutic system, depotentiate. Because you retold the narrative and you emphasized a different chapter, a different perspective on it,
Yeah. It's pretty amazing to see the immediate effect. And of course, the client's eyes when they go, oh, wow, you weren't full of it when you said there was something emotional in here. No. Doesn't mean I knew what it was. You're the one who told me the story. I just helped you get there. That's all it was. It's helped you point at the things that mattered from the story, focusing on the good.
Well, you're so right. I mean, that's a lot of the role we play, is just being a catalyst. The individual's actually having to do the work. And if they're not willing to do the work, our being a catalyst is going to be of little value,
Yeah, and the same goes for anyone, whether it's addiction, depression, all these certain things, anxiety. These are all symptoms of an underlying thing going on, of a narrative that needs to be have certain things depotentiated and understood. If you don't want that story to change, that's your choice. We can't change that for you. We can push you in the right direction. Hopefully, you come back in a year, but really, the past, if you want to focus on the past and live there and let that control you, and the negative parts of the past is what I mean, it's powerful. It will hold you. And frankly, it's easier to stay in that the comfort that in a way.
Well, sometimes all that we're doing when we're talking about sometimes the non-physical stuff that's going on, it certainly can have physical side effects like insomnia, etc. Dyspepsia, it can have a number of side effects. But I think of a 42-year-old woman, with a 17-year-old son, being married for, I think, 19 years. And her husband was a two-time felon and all that, had a pretty checkered background, kind of a rough character. But I guess really good looking. I haven't seen him, but I just was dealing with her. And she's apparently found somebody else of interest. Now, the way she put it was just, she mentions this guy's name. I'll just call him Guy for the moment. And so she mentions the word guy. So Guy. So the whole affect behind it quite clearly. She says, just somebody who was interested. Well, obviously a lot more than interest was going on and had gone on for some time. And the one reason she didn't jump from, let's just call the guy she's with, Bubba, to Guy, is because Bubba's got the money and Guy doesn't. Bubba keeps her up in a fancy lifestyle where she can get and do anything she wants, but she's in a gilded cage. He expects her to be home by 2, to have dinner on the table by 5, like some guy out of the 1950s. And she's, very, very careful. She's not allowed to have friends, basically. If she has friends, he talks really rough and nasty to them and to her. And it's quite abusive. And he's physically attacked her. He smacked her around. But as long as he's the wallet, he can smack her around and she'll stay for the wallet. So I'm going, I can't resolve this for you. I can show you what you're doing. And she said, what's that? I said, this is a Philippine monkey trap. Are you familiar with the Philippine monkey trap?
I'm not.
Okay, it's a real thing, but it's actually a Buddhist fable as well, to where some tribes, if they wanted, they actually eat monkeys. I could not eat a monkey, but some people do. They would cut a little hole in the coconut and get rope and tie it down really hard to a stump or two. So the monkey, and they break up sections of coconut, leave it inside, puts his hand in there to get the coconut, and he won't pull his hand out as long as it's got that piece of coconut in it. So he's stuck with that, and they can come along with a blow dart or a bow and arrow and kill the monkey because he's down from the tree and he's holding onto this coconut, not willing to let go of it, because that's where the goodie is. You see, that's where the payoff is. Even though it means somebody's sneaking up on you with an arrow, and you're not going to be here much longer. You're going to be on somebody's spit getting roasted shortly. That's what he does. It's the same concept. Here's a guy you're in love with over here, and everything you say about it indicates that. And without ever coming out and saying it to me, she wasn't being that honest. She's not capable of that degree of honesty, I don't think. It was pretty much implicit, the way she framed everything. And here's a guy she's stuck with. And she feels, then he's playing her. He's very good at manipulation, to feel guilty about leaving him. And of course, he has no idea. She's been seeing this other guy pretty consistently for a while here. So she's trying to approach him like, hey, give me some money so I can move out and get another place and so on. So it's this whole tangled thing. And I haven't been much into it. I just did one session with her and talked to her kind of informally a couple of times afterward. But I said, here. So all you can do sometimes as the intermediator, as the catalyst, is to say, here's your choices. You can stay where you are, and you'll know that this is a guy you're not in love with. You may feel there by guilt. You've raised a child together who's now more than a child. You've been together for a while. You've got history, but you really don't fit any longer. You've moved on. He hasn't. You've got this guy over here who's everything you want. He's metaphysical. He's very intelligent. He's, he's just not capable of keeping you up in the manner to which you are accustomed. And
also keep in mind a huge factor that goes into it. It's not just the being locked in a gilded cage and the money. When someone lives in that type of relationship, you have the fear to leave, and also the abusive that goes on makes them trapped in that cognitive dissonance where they think in rational wise, this is appropriate to do. So it's not just about the money.
Oh, and also if I get smacked around, I deserve it, because I'm sure she feels guilty about her liaisons with this other fellow, with Guy instead of Bubba. So if Bubba slams her around like an old pillow, that's okay, because I've got it coming. So it's very toxic. But all you can do in a situation like that, you can't force them to get outside. You can just expose it to them and say, here's what you're living in. This is not healthy. You have to decide one way or the other and make peace with it. If you're staying, make peace with that. But with all she said, I don't see how she does make peace with it.
You can't stay just because the monetary is there. I have another client the same way. Just because it's comfortable monetarily, even if you're going to be uncomfortable living with roommates or living in a really bad one room, like low key 1-bedroom apartment, working at Walmart, it's still better than living in absolute misery every single day, because at least it's yours.
No, actually, she wouldn't be working at Walmart and living in one room, but she's got good skills and has a good clientele in what she does do for a living. So she's not going to be hurting that way. It's just a question of probably a matter of getting more. And maybe instead of driving the latest model, or maybe a model that's only 3 or 4 years old, you're driving a 15, 20-year-old vehicle. that's well maintained, maybe, but it's not the best. And maybe you don't get to stop at the fancy coffee place for $8 a cup for your coffee. You make it at home, okay. But for authenticity, it's a question of what is authenticity worth to you, and how much are you willing to forego your authenticity, your honesty with yourself, basically, to have all this lucre, to have all this goodie, this higher standard of living, this gilded cage. And again,
money should not be the driving force in a relationship ever. It should never be that. You need a certain amount of money to survive, of course. The basic needs to be met. But outside of that, it should not be a reason to stay, ever.
All our role has to be, I think, is just to shine a light into the dark areas of their psyche and say, here, what is your motive here? What do you plan to do with this element? Are you aware that part of why you're staying with this guy is out of guilt? Because you've as much as admitted, of course, you're not admitting the whole thing. You're just saying you found this friend and we're good friends and all that sort of stuff that women say. But, we both know it's more than that. And meanwhile, how do you navigate this? And, so instead, she's trying to have her cake and eat it too, and live with this divided mind. And of course, all the symptoms that go with that. And all you can do is just lay it out for them and say, here, these are your options.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't decide, you didn't give me anything. Well, no, I'm not going to decide for you. I can't. I can say there are challenges and opportunities in either one. The challenges and opportunities, if you leave this guy, are you're having to dig more into your business that you're doing, probably having to work more hours. You probably have less just discretionary spending like you have had. I know you're afraid of the effect it has on the son that you share, but hey, kids get used to it. Their parents outgrow their relationships and break up. You can do it amicably and honorably on your part and not be sitting there throwing accusations at each other. You can handle the breakup amicably. Or you can stay with Bubba, forget you ever met Guy, and just keep on going and say, okay, he couldn't afford me. Bubba can, so I'll stay here. And I'll live within the gilded cage and be glad it's gilded, and try to stay out of the way of his temper so I don't get smacked around again.
Yeah. It's not a happy situation for anyone, including the child, because the child sees this model behavior as an appropriate type of relationship.
Yes, unfortunately.
And listen, we have so many factors that go into this. It's not just the interactions between the two, the toxic male or the toxic female. You have the programming from the mainstream media, Disney, everything going on. And so we're shown this model is what is to be expected from day one. So I think a lot of people also, it's the same concept as when you're trying to make peace with the conflict of how has this happened. Sometimes it is personal choice, but also those personal choices are, kind of influence of how we're raised and what we experience.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So when someone feels like it's all their fault, like, oh, I'm trapped in this situation and all of this is my fault. Okay. No, let's understand why this forms so we don't repeat the same mechanisms over and over again in the next relationship, so we can make peace with it. Otherwise, we just go, I'm a bad person, and leave. We don't know why did we get in this situation in the first place, which is the most important part.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to get into all of that with a second session.
No, they would have to want to. They'd have to want to go forward first. But I'm more saying this for the listeners to understand.
Yeah,
because it's never a simple. I did this. I want to be here because this. I deserve something. Guy or girl. There's so many factors, and every single person has their own narrative or their own chapters, their own little summaries, but they don't capture the entire chapter of their life. Yeah. If you just read the abstract, you just read the summary, you only get a small little piece.
It's kind of like a layer cake with different sediment layers in it. On one layer, I want to be thought of well by my child. On another layer, I feel guilty about hurting Bubba. Well, not enough to keep me from running around with Guy, but that's okay. I needed that because, hey, he and I don't really connect spiritually. You don't really have anything to talk about.
And I actually feel happy.
And I'm actually happy around this guy. And he doesn't threaten me, and he doesn't squeeze me into having dinner ready at 5 or all that. He's glad to see me. It's fun.
Yeah.
Don't have all this.
I mean, how how many relationships have you seen that get destroyed just because people didn't sit down and talk about what's going on? Like,
well, you can appreciate the situation to some extent. She can't really have this talk about. She's even tried to get Bubba into therapy. He doesn't want to go. As far as he's concerned, everything's fine. He's getting everything he wants. Why should he do anything differently? He's not going to.
well, I mean, and that's at the point where the therapy decides that this
Right.
cannot be fixed. Both people have to want to fix it. If
Right.
one person wants to, one doesn't, it's not a relationship anymore.
Yeah.
Relationship only suits the people when both are agreeing to it. It's a contract that you both have to agree to. That doesn't mean that's one reason I was never a fan of when you get married, the concept till death do us part, which is the normal ceremony and whatnot.
Right.
Sure. Like, I like that you want to spend your life with someone. But to me, it's also only if you both still want to spend your life together. You're making that promise that you're going to grow together to the best of your ability. And if you want to stay together till you die, you better keep doing that.
Do you think wedding chapels should change the vow to say till it works or something like that?
Well, no, I think till death is a good thing. I'm saying what creates that is you don't get married and then that vow is what solidifies till death do us part. That vow is to take accountability through your life, hold your partner accountable, and grow together. If you don't do those factors, you can't stay together till death. If that vow does not create that longevity.
I think what you're speaking about is whether you have a shared intention or two separate intentions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if somebody has the intention of, I'm here to grow, I'm here to change, I'm here to expand to be better than I was, and to, through you, see a better relationship form between what becomes us, different way of thinking.
Yeah. And, any couple that's going through that, anyone listening, there's always two sides to it. Just because one person feels one way, the other person feels the other way. You sit there together.
This is, I think, one of the interesting things about polytheistic faiths is that we actually see the interaction and we feel the interaction of gods and goddesses, of families of higher order beings, rather than just a single tyrant running everything. And that's very interesting. That's kind of informative. And we see the agency on both parts. It's not like he's the order giver and she's the order taker,
Well, I mean, when we think about this, we have our own lens, our own perspective. Training as shamans, and we want to keep our ego in check in a healing thing, in a session. We should not project and cause transference for ourselves to the client. But we can only still view things through our own lens, our own knowledge, and we do our best to expand that. But likewise, I mean, I'm a 6'4" white male. I don't know what it's like to be a 4'11" little Italian girl. And I'm reminded of that consistently with my own wife when we have discussions, where even when I think I am right, I go, I did not actually understand how that affected you. Okay, cool. And, because it's a different lens. And
I think
we can't pretend to know everything.
This is one of the reasons that in our particular way of doing shamanism, there's a long training period. People have an opportunity to work with hundreds of clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, depending on the type of services sought, before they're ever out on their own. They're working with their teachers closely. They catch things before it becomes a problem. And it's just very carefully done. Not like a lot of these things where it's just kind of a 6-month course, or it's just done online and they're out there pretending to do counseling and pretending to basically do psychiatry with people without the depth and without doing the studies that we had to do to get there. Actually studying third force psychology, studying transactional psychology, studying all these different things, rational emotive therapy, etc., as well as the traditional and older ways of evaluating interactions and human interrelationships.
Right, yeah.
So
you have to actually understand it. And even then, it doesn't mean you know everything. You are learning from every single client, every interaction.
All we can do is to try to really listen to them and because there's always that part of the human experience which does overlap, which we do have in common with everyone, that part of our common or shared humanity, which we can use to as a pathway to understand their perspective, try to incorporate their perspectives. When you do meet that, 3'11" member of the Andaman Islands tribe that's never seen outsiders yet, and they'll carry a spear into the training. I'm not putting them down. That's fine if that's how they live. You just say, excuse me, don't scratch my couch with your spear. And yes, what can I do to help you?
It's pretty funny image in my head right now. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We jumped around a lot today, but
sure.
I hope listeners, you enjoyed us talking about the importance of the past, how it ties to the present, but how the emotions need to be left back there. How the focus is where we are now. We look to the future, but we live here. And how, frankly, for anyone that is going through anything, whether it's with another person, interrelationally, intimately, figure out if you're in a place that you are happy. Figure out if you're in a place where you are living authentically to yourself. Anything else you want to leave?
We as priests or priestesses can offer something that some regular psychotherapists can't offer. We can actually bring in the intercession of a god or goddess to help with the problem. Quite often that's very, very powerful, as we've seen in some of the sessions we've done together with people, like the fellow with the chest issue, that can really make a powerful difference when they do things even way beyond what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple I was working with where as we invited Thria in, they were being helped to find the right words to say and to get past their defense mechanisms, to really hear each other truthfully. Which, I mean, when I first experienced that with my wife in a couple session, I sat there going, that was so simple. Why couldn't we see that in our own home? Because, well, you have the stress of your own home there sometimes. So bringing the gods and goddesses is quite powerful. They're pretty neat, right?
Quite amazing, really, what they bring into our lives, into our sessions like that. It really is, All right, well, it's been a pleasure, Brian.
You as well, Georg. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Go with the gods.